All right, so this is a presentation that I did at Microsoft for a group of women not too long ago, a couple weeks back, and it got a lot of really good feedback, and I just wanted to kind of share it with you guys. I will go over kind of some brief descriptions of different topics. I have a YouTube channel, so I have some full presentations on a lot of these topics separately. So I have one on the intro to nutrition. I have one on cycle-specific training and nutrition needs. I have one on like perimenopause and menopause. And then I'll finish up this presentation with a little talk about how stress relates to these different topics and can actually affect how you get to your goals. So just for those of you that don't know me, I am a functional nutrition coach. So I do help people with anything from like PCOS, Hashimoto's, like bringing cholesterol down, like resetting insulin sensitivity, to just, weight loss and even performance coaching. So I do a lot of things. I won't go into my backstory necessarily. I know that some of you have probably heard it and been here before. But I will say, like, I'll do a little Cliff Notes version. I got into fitness, or I really kind of dove into fitness probably about 12, 15 years ago, when I really dove into like CrossFit and being competitive. And at that point in time, I was doing what I felt like was all the things that you were supposed to do. Like I was working out, I was probably putting in multiple workouts a day. And bottom line, I wasn't eating as much as I should have. I was eating based off of what the fitness magazine cover girl said that she ate, the 1,200 calories a day to get on the cover. And I was like, oh, I should do that. And I regurgitated that information. And long story short, I felt like trash. My body was broken. I didn't have a period for upwards of 15 years. I was on birth control. And it wasn't until I hired a nutrition coach and he's like, you need to eat more, carbs, that I got leaner and I started feeling better and my body started recovering. And I still hadn't gotten my period back. So working with another mentorship coach further along in my journey, like we started to do some supplementation to help me get my period back. And when I got my period back, I started to notice cravings and changes in performance. And based off of the education that I had gotten leading up to that point, as far as like level 1 nutrition, level 2 nutrition, and then mindset and hormones, I cued into the fact that there was something associated with needing different macros, which I'll talk about, macros being protein, carbs, and fats, that went into your cycle or like aligned with your cycle. Same thing with training, because if you're changing macros, protein, carbs, and fats, you want to have a supportive training program that goes along with that. So not only do I work in kind of functional nutrition coaching, but I also work with, training needs and nutrition needs associated with your cycle to help to balance hormones, both in someone that's cycling regularly, as well as like perimenopause, menopause, and that life phase. So I'm going to briefly kind of touch on the basics of nutrition, and then we'll move into hormones and training and perimenopause and stress. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. I'm going to minimize the window to see you guys. So if you have a question, or if you want me to stop, you can use the hand raise option or put a question in the chat and I will stop and answer any questions that come up. All right, so intro to nutrition and hormones. So I want to start with macros versus micros. Before I get into this, I think it's important to kind of look at calories versus macros versus micros. So
okay, hold on. Can you hold on just 2 seconds while I run grab a pen, because I'm interested in this. So hold on.
Okay. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. All right, so as far as like calories versus macros versus micros are concerned, hold on. The best way to think about this is calories dictate weight. Macros dictate how you look at that weight. Micros dictate how you feel at that. So when we're looking at kind of developing a plan, like I work a lot with macros. So macros being protein, carbs, and fats, and also the micros being those vitamins and minerals. So when I'm working to kind of create a plan for someone, I'm working to basically align their macros, so how someone looks at a specific weight, with their micros to make them feel good at that weight. So macros in short are macronutrients, term used to describe the nutrients your body needs in large amounts, specifically carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. You want your diet to have a balance of carbs, fats, and proteins. Micronutrients are vitamins and minerals needed by the body in very small amounts. However, their impact on the body's health are critical, and deficiencies in any of them can cause severe and even life-threatening conditions. So let's understand these macros separately. So proteins equate to about 4 calories per gram. So that means if you look at a food label and it says that there's 10 grams of protein in it, that means 40 calories of that total calorie on that label are from protein. So you can look at a label and you can figure out if it's wrong or right based off of knowing how proteins, carbs, and fats calculate to calories. Labels that you'll see kind of misrepresented would be ones that justify net carbs. So basically they're using fiber to justify reducing carbs. Yes, Kristen, go ahead.
Are you able to send us this when we're done? If not, I was just gonna screenshot stuff.
The replay or the presentation in general?
The presentation.
I can probably do that. I can send you a link to it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I was just gonna start copying like all the stuff down. So if like you can just send us, that'd be a lot easier.
Yeah, well, I can definitely send you the replay, and I don't know that I have your email address, but if you want to message me your email address, I can like link this to you.
Yeah.
And you can kind of look at these and take screenshots or examples of it as needed.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Okay. So protein is the most thermically effective macro. So that means the process of breaking down and distributing protein equates to a higher thermic effect from your food. And I'll talk about total daily energy expenditure and where the thermic effect of food kind of plays into that. But basically, getting enough protein means that we are utilizing a higher calorie burn from the foods that we're consuming. It's the most satiating macro. So eating enough protein will leave you feeling fuller longer. It's responsible for the repair of skeletal muscle tissue. So going to the gym and working out, like we need protein. Maintaining muscle mass on a daily basis, we need protein. It's not something that your body can create, so we need to consume it. Without it, our bodies can't repair breakdown of muscle mass or breakdown of lean muscle tissue from exercise. Protein is the main factor in maintaining lean muscle mass. Protein cannot be stored in the muscles like glucose, which is carbs. So it's important to consume enough protein daily to maintain muscle mass. Carbs. So carbs equate to 4 calories per gram as well. So same thing, if we had a food label and it said 10 grams of carbs, that's 40 calories that we are receiving from carbs in that product. So carbs are technically not an essential nutrient, but essential for hitting fiber goals, increasing nutrient density of your foods, supporting the gut microbiome. And for those pursuing performance or high intensity output activities, it is a primary fuel source. Carbs are necessary for the recovery of the CNS, which is the central nervous system, and the body. They help turn off the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response, and return the body to a parasympathetic system, which is rest, digest, and repair. They're important in supporting your thyroid and sleep. Carbs are the preferred fuel source for your brain. So in this, basically, like the way people get away with keto is because carbs are non-essential, but just so we know, like the brain prefers carbs. So if you've ever talked to someone that's like in keto or in ketosis, they have like brain fog potential. So one, if you're doing any sort of activity, you don't want to be in keto because carbs are necessary for performance pursuits. Carbs are necessary for your brain. They provide fiber. So different forms of fiber feed different microorganisms basically in your gut microbiome. So by basically removing fiber, you can essentially kill off good gut bugs and decrease the amount of nutrients or micronutrients that you're getting. So those vitamins and minerals. So we want to make sure that we are getting enough high quality carbs. And a lot of what I do in my coaching, like there is room for fun foods, there's room for other carbs, but we want majority of the carbs that we're consuming to be coming from nutrient dense sources. The most common carbs that you will encounter are glucose, which is preferentially stored in the muscles, and fructose, which are simple carbs found in fruits, and those are preferentially stored in the liver. All right, fats. Fats equal 9 calories per gram. So same thing on that label. If you had 10 grams of fat, that would be 90 calories. So it's preferentially used for aerobic type activities because the rate of conversion is much slower than that of carbs. Fats are used for energy, hormonal production, formation of cell membranes, and they provide essential fatty acids or fatty acids that the body can't make. They are important for nervous system health and support. Okay, so I have to talk about alcohol if I'm talking about macros. Technically, alcohol is considered a macro. Alcohol is, it's 7 calories per gram. There is no nutritional benefits to it. And the negative benefits that it actually brings about are far outweigh its positives. So alcohol is often considered the fourth macronutrient. It's separate from protein, carbs, and fats. The difference is alcohol provides no nutritional benefits. Like the other macronutrients, alcohol contains calories. So it contains 7 calories per gram. For macro counting purposes, it is tracked as carbs or fat or a combination of both. So for example, if you were to calculate the equivalent of a drink, say it's 100 calories, you would either use 25 grams of carbs or 11 grams of fat to track that beverage. Negative benefits or not benefits, negative outcomes associated with alcohol consumption. So if we consider our liver kind of like having a conveyor belt that brings everything into it that needs to be processed through the body. When alcohol is consumed, the alcohol is a toxin. So the door to the liver shuts. Like the liver's priority is removing that toxin from the body. So everything that is supposed to be removed on a normal, consistent basis basically gets recirculated into the body. So any sort of hormonal metabolites that are set to be removed get recirculated. So estrogen is a prime example where we see estrogen dominance start to occur, both in men and women as alcohol is consumed because estrogen gets recirculated into the body. Now, other things that can be affected would be insulin sensitivity. So I can't remember the statistic, but basically we can increase our insulin resistance. So basically our inability to manage carbs. So equating to the potential of higher blood sugars and more likelihood of high A1C or like pushing someone into the pre-diabetic range by consuming alcohol too often. I kind of like to think of it as far as how often should you drink alcohol? I would rather someone drink a lot 1 day a week versus 1 glass every day. If you were to think about it like your boss giving you a stack of paperwork every day and you almost get to the bottom and then they give you another stack, you almost get to the bottom and they give you another stack, that's how drinking every day would be. Versus, hey, you got a big stack, you get down to the bottom and at least you can clear out your inbox. That would be kind of the equivalent of doing it once a week. So you can do it, just make sure you're doing it smart. I generally recommend people increase their water consumption and increase their fiber consumption if they are going to drink. Any questions on any of those?
Yes, sorry, I do. Not that I drink alcohol. So I did cut it down to once a week, but when you're saying drink water, so drink water throughout the day, or is it beneficial to have like one drink and a glass of water? One drink,
Yes.
a glass of water.
Yes. So when you are drinking, alcohol inhibits your ADH. So that's your antidiuretic hormone. So basically that's where the whole breaking the seal kind of comes into play. So you notice after a couple drinks, like you start peeing all the time. So that's the dehydration. So for the sake of like supporting detox pathways and not having that like detox terrible headache the next day or that dehydration headache, it is important and I advise it to do one drink, one glass of water, one drink, one glass of water. And then the next day, continue with the water consumption. And another thing is as far as like how to place your alcohol around your food, you're better off eating your meal beforehand and giving those macros a chance to kind of make their way to the liver before the alcohol versus empty stomach consumption of alcohol.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what your total daily energy expenditure is. So this is like your daily metabolism. So we have, well, before I get into that, the calories that you consume are not calories that you have to earn through exercise. Your body needs nutrients on a daily basis. Your body needs and deserves food and nutrients every single day, whether you exercise or not. It's important to know your body burns calories and we have the ability to increase your metabolism in ways outside of exercise. So exercise is not the end all be all of your metabolism. So we have 4 components to your metabolism. So your total daily energy expenditure is comprised of 4 things: your BMR, NEAT, thermic effect of food or TEF, and then exercise activity. So your BMR is your basal metabolic rate. So this is the amount of energy it takes to support your organs and physiological systems. This is approximately 60 to 75% of your total daily calories burned. The 3 organs most responsible are your liver, your brain, and your skeletal muscle tissue. So about 27% to the liver, 19% to the brain, and 18% to your muscles. Now, NEAT is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So every time you perform physical exertion that isn't planned exercise. So this could be something like folding laundry. This is blinking. This is fidgeting. This is going for a walk, like getting those 10K steps. Like that makes up about 10 to 20% of your calories on a daily basis. The thermic effect of food. So, I talked about protein being the most thermically effective. So protein is the most thermically effective. High fiber carbs, I would say, fall second on that list. So this is the amount of calories you burn simply by digesting your food. So protein has the highest thermic effect, then carbohydrates, and by carbohydrates, I mean high fiber ones, and then fat comes in last. Processed foods have a lower thermic effect than unprocessed foods. So we're talking probably about 10 to 15% of your total calories on a daily basis that basically come from the thermic effect of food. So just a little note on this in regards to when we go into a diet phase. When you're in a diet phase or not consuming enough calories, you actually reduce the thermic effect of your food. So when we're operating off of an assumed like maintenance and we remove calories and we remove calories to create that deficit, we're also losing out on some of the thermic effect of the food that you were consuming prior. So eat is the next one. So exercise activity, thermogenesis. So this is planned exercise. So this is going to the gym, taking a class. So this really only makes up about 5% of your total daily energy expenditure, but it's as important as the rest of them, because by going to the gym, you can increase your muscle mass, which increases your BMR, which makes up a majority of those total daily energy expenditure calories. Not to mention, by increasing your muscle mass, you don't have to worry about as many things when you take a day off. Like, you're not losing your gains. You're not like, your metabolism doesn't just shut down because you didn't go to the gym for a day or because you go on vacation. Like, by increasing muscle mass, you essentially can burn calories doing nothing or sitting in the lounge chair on a vacation. All right, could metabolic adaptations be the reason you get stuck when trying to achieve your goals? So metabolic adaptations are changes your body makes based off the environment it is experiencing it. Oftentimes, this is when the body isn't getting enough food or is it experiencing a higher or prolonged period of stress. This is the body's survival mechanism to ensure you have enough energy to perform essential functions. Some signs of metabolic adaptation can come in the form of muscle wasting and holding on to body fat, reproductive hormone changes, changes in hunger response, fat storage, sleep disruptions, and much more. One of the most common ones I see when people are under eating is things where basically the body doesn't have enough calories to maintain muscle mass. So if we consider that muscle is expensive to maintain, it will offload muscle mass and it will store body fat. So a lot of times I see people really cutting calories and trying to work out more and more and more, but really that's putting the body in more of a stressed, potentially like metabolic adaptation type environment. Generally, we'll see reproductive hormone changes as well, because in an environment where there's not enough food for the body to maintain itself or basically fulfill its essential or perform its essential functions, it wouldn't make sense to bring more mouths to feed into the environment. All right, any questions on that before I move into some hormones?
Yeah, sorry. So how do we know where we should fall within those 3 macros?
So it depends. I generally put people's like stats through equations, like mathematic equations, that are out there, and then I adjust them based off of how their body responds. So like, for example, like I consume upwards of like 25 to 2,800 calories. And, that's what I consume on a daily basis. And I will make adjustments based off of what my hunger response is, like what my sleep quality is. And that's kind of what I do with my clients. I look to see what kind of cravings they're having, because that can tell me if their body is stressed. So something like a salt craving is more associated with like adrenal health and high cortisol, or like a lot of stress in their environment. Sugar cravings or high carb cravings could have to do with them not getting enough calories in general. If they don't have a hunger response at all, that would fall into one of those metabolic adaptations. So making sure that we get a hunger response back. As far as determining where your calories are, that's very individualized. So
Okay.
it's hard I can generally figure out a baseline, and then I adjust and make changes based off biofeedback.
So I guess my question is, I know just from being around you that you do like a nutritional, like this information is fantastic. If we want something specific to us, do we have the option of doing what you do with other clients where you help us figure it out?
Yeah, for sure. So like we can talk more about nutrition coaching and what that
Cool.
looks like. Yeah, for sure.
And my only other one question, then I'll stop. So if I have consistent salt cravings, and I have for years, That's,
Mhm.
what did you call that? Adrenal?
Adrenal health. So it probably has to do with your adrenals and maybe a little bit of stress or chronic stress in your life.
Okay.
So basically, we would want to look at where you might be receiving stressors and work on kind of counterbalance mechanisms to bring that down. If you had any lab work, that would be a way that we could see what cortisol looked like.
Okay.
And then we would just work on kind of bringing that down and de-stressing your body so that your adrenal glands don't kind of kick the can.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Thank you.
Oh, no, good questions. All right, so how do hormones impact training and nutrition needs? So women are often taught to be ashamed of their hormones, like it's some sort of curse, disadvantage, or weakness they were unfortunately born with. In high school, there is minimal education around how beautiful and amazing a woman's monthly cycle is. We're taught to whisper and hide something that every woman gets. Men are grossed out about it, so it somehow becomes our job to hide it. We do diets, exercise, and work schedules that are designed and researched to primarily support the male body. And then we feel like it's something we're doing wrong as to why we can't keep up, stick with it, or have the same kind of results. And that's not fair. So let's understand the cycle and what our needs are based off of these different hormones and where we can actually like optimize not only our training, but knowing these things help to kind of look at schedules and be like, okay, like I know I'm going to be more social and outgoing during this part of my cycle. I'm going to schedule a presentation during my follicular phase because I know that I'm more outgoing then. So understanding your hormones can give you so many insights, not only in like nutrition training, but also like with your job, with life, like scheduling events. So let's just talk about the basics of your cycle and what you need to know so that as we kind of move forward, we can understand where training and nutrition needs can vary. So your cycle, like the three main players in your cycle are going to be estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So your follicular phase is day 1 through 14. So day 1 is your period bleed or that first day of your flow. Day 14 is that ovulation or that transition into the luteal phase. So if we look at this little graph, we've got all of our hormones that start in this low spot. So basically when they hit their lowest point, that's when our period starts. Estrogen begins to rise during those first 2 weeks in our cycle. It peaks at ovulation, drops off, and then has a lesser rise during the second half. Progesterone stays pretty low down here. Then ovulation kicks off the accumulation or the rise of progesterone. It peaks about, day 21. So between week 3 and 4, and then drops off. Testosterone gets a slight boost right at ovulation. So think sex drive. Basically the body trying to get you pregnant. So during the first phase, around this day 1, we may experience some rollover inflammation from the luteal phase. So basically the drop off of progesterone will trigger an inflammatory response. So our body is sitting in a more inflamed state during that last week of your cycle. Estrogen rises throughout the follicular phase and it peaks at ovulation. We have a slight bump of testosterone right before ovulation, basically with the intention of increasing sex drive. So the body trying to get you pregnant. The luteal phase is day 15 through 28, assuming a 28-day cycle. Now they say the average cycle is 28 days. Now that means that there can be a shorter cycle and it can still be normal, and there can be a longer cycle and it will still be normal. But the average is about 28 days. Estrogen drops and then has a slightly lesser rise during the second half or during the luteal phase. So ways that I like to remember this: follicular phase is the first phase, luteal phase is the last phase. Progesterone is the star hormone during the luteal phase. It has a drop off about mid-luteal phase, assuming no pregnancy occurs. If pregnancy occurs, then progesterone continues to climb. To test progesterone, if you get lab work done and if there is any question as to what your progesterone looks like, you want to make sure that you're getting your lab work drawn between day 18 and 22 of your cycle, because that is when we anticipate progesterone should be at its highest point. So testing any other time, we wouldn't really know if your progesterone was getting where, or getting to the range that it should be. During this time in a woman's cycle, her body's priorities turn inward during the luteal phase. So immune system actually downregulates a little bit, inflammation is slightly higher, and recovery is slower. So let's understand the hormones separately so that we can understand where their benefits are. So estrogen is primarily produced in the ovaries, but it's also produced by fat cells and by the adrenals. It is an integral part of the endocrine system. So the endocrine system produces hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue function, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, and mood, among other things. During the follicular phase, estrogen rises and peaks at ovulation. Estrogen is like a woman's superwoman power or hormone. Increasing levels of estrogen are associated with an increased release of feel-good hormones. So serotonin and dopamine, they rise during the follicular phase. It also helps to reduce inflammation and creates more glowing skin. We actually have more skin turnover during the follicular phase. Things just feel good during this part of the cycle. They're higher energy, better mood, better recovery, and better blood sugar stability. Progesterone is mainly produced due to ovulation. So the adrenals also produce progesterone, but in much lesser amounts. If a woman does not ovulate, then she basically doesn't get progesterone. If a woman is on birth control pills, basically that shuts down natural production of hormones and shuts down ovulation and controls it with synthetic hormones. So the period that a woman gets on hormonal birth control is a withdrawal bleed due to that last week of pills. And they will not receive the actual benefits associated with progesterone, which I'll talk about next. During menopause, the adrenals become the main producers of progesterone. Healthy levels of progesterone act as a natural antidepressant, contribute to a restful night's sleep, and allows the body to use fat as energy source. Progesterone is the precursor to GABA, which produces a calming effect on the brain. This can help with feelings of anxiety, stress, and fear. Progesterone counters estrogen. So where estrogen brought up serotonin and dopamine levels, basically the fall off of progesterone will bring them down. Progesterone and its effect on the respiratory system. So it can actually cause a higher respiratory rate and resting heart rate during the luteal phase. Progesterone drops off mid-luteal phase, triggering an inflammatory response. So this means your body naturally sits at a slightly more inflamed state during that last week of your cycle. This change in progesterone triggers a change in sodium set point, which can cause water retention and actually change blood plasma volume and the amount of oxygen that can be carried to your muscles for activity. Testosterone. So testosterone in combination with estrogen creates a great environment for muscle growth and a higher level of competitiveness. So working out around ovulation, if you're competitive and want to put on muscle, is a great environment to have. Testosterone generally gets a slight boost during and after workouts naturally. Using strength training and high intensity training is a great way to boost testosterone naturally and to help increase muscle mass during this time. Aerobics or prolonged periods of moderate exercise have actually been shown to have a negative effect on testosterone. So ideally, you want to lift heavy, and I say heavy in quotes because that is relative to the individual. Like what's heavy for me might not be heavy for someone else, or vice versa. Using short rest intervals. So doing something like a 20 seconds on, like 40 seconds off, would be a great way to kind of utilize or, maximize this testosterone boost. So compound exercises that recruit more muscles like squats, deadlifts, and presses are best for your hormones and body composition. So doing heavier weights and less reps is actually better.
Coming to workout class is better.
Exactly.
Hey.
Come to workout class.
I just had a question on 2 slides back.
Yep.
So essentially what that's saying is
That progesterone one? Is that the one you're talking about?
the birth control slide. So being on birth control, whether it be the IUD, the one in your arm, or the pills, those are actually disturbing your body's natural.
Yes. So as far as like IUDs, it does depend. Like the copper IUD is a non-hormonal IUD. But anything that is kind of controlled by hormones is going to bog down your liver and is essentially going to flatline your natural occurring hormones. And some of the side effects of those are actually the opposite of, like, for example, like progesterone. They use progestine, which has some of the opposite effects of naturally occurring progesterone.
Interesting. I mean, they pretty much put everybody on that. So isn't that really counterproductive?
Well, this is an opinion, but it is very interesting how many fertility issues and
depression too.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like we have a society filled with women that are suffering from these problems, and it is kind of like I look at it, and I mean, I was on birth control for like 15 years. I didn't get a period for 15 years. And I think about some of the things that I experienced during that time, and it breaks my heart that no one was like, oh, like you were fine before, then you went on birth control and you experienced this. And there's so many women that happens to, and instead of looking at what changed, oh, you went on birth control, let's take you off of it, they instead medicate the symptom that they've come in for, say it be like anxiety or depression or, you know, acne or whatever.
Yeah.
Birth control becomes the answer rather than, okay, like let's figure out the root of this and why this occurred in the first place. So
that's super interesting because, you know, just when you said that, it hit me like, you know, from, I don't even know, like high school, after high school till I was, you know, in my 20s, I always took birth control, albeit probably not religiously, because you get 20 and then you're like, whatever. Oh, I forgot to take it. Let's take it, whatever. But that's almost worse also if you take it and don't take it and take it random times. It's really messing with your psyche, your emotional stability, your depression, like Tina said. But on the flip side of that, I can also contest to acne, mood swings, all these things. Like, it makes sense to me now why, you know, that would have happened. I mean, if you disturb your body's natural process with additional hormones, anything could happen, really.
Could happen.
You know?
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I know for myself, when I came off birth control, I had a terrible like androgen rebound effect. So basically my body trying to like re-regulate my hormones, and I had like this cystic acne that was like so painful, and my doctor's, you know, answer was, well, let's put you back on birth control. And it was never like, oh, like this is a side effect of coming off of birth control because your hormones had compensated so much. And even things like PCOS, like there's actually 4 different kinds of PCOS, one of them being a post-birth control PCOS, because a lot of the symptoms are very similar to PCOS, but they are associated with coming off of the birth control pill.
Wow.
So yeah, understanding that synthetic hormones will bog down the liver and will actually have an effect on your detox pathways and your gut microbiome. And there's actually some research about birth control actually kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? Basically having a effect on partner selection because it changes your hormones. So it changes kind of pheromones and like what you seek out. Yeah. So it's obviously like a topic in itself.
Yeah. It's just crazy how, and it is a topic in itself, but it's just crazy to me how something that is considered so mainstream, for lack of a better term, is doing so much damage when you really think about it to a person's well-being all around.
Yeah.
And nobody talks about it. They just treat the side effects. Okay, we're going to put you on birth control because that benefits you from getting pregnant. But here's what it's going to do to you. It's going to, not destroy necessarily, but you have to become really good at hiding your feelings or hiding certain things so that you don't come off as crazy, when in reality, it's a physical reaction to what you think is helping you.
Yep. Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a movie or a documentary, it's called The Business of Birth Control. And it's really eye-opening. It talks about, like how much money like pharma companies actually put aside for anticipated lawsuits. It was a significant amount, and like deaths that have actually occurred from different forms of birth control. So it's yeah. It's not something you want to talk anymore about today, because we could go on a quick tangent.
I feel like that just struck me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's not just you either take the birth control or you don't, and because they told you to. Like literally, that strikes me as I can equate a lot of things that I think have become different in my life since not being on birth control. So yeah, okay, cool.
Yep, 100%.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about nutrition and fitness needs for your cycle. So the follicular phase, as I said, for like the first couple of days, you might experience rollover inflammation from the luteal phase. We have that drop off of progesterone in the second half of the luteal phase that triggers that inflammatory response. So this could cause discomfort at the beginning of your period. Higher amounts of inflammation will cause more prostaglandins, which are what basically contract the uterus to expel the lining. So if you have more inflammation coming from, say, lifestyle and nutrition, that can cause more of an inflammatory response, which can increase prostaglandins, which can increase painful cramps, basically. So during the follicular phase, the body is better equipped to handle stressors, because estrogen's presence and that rising of estrogen will basically make the body better at handling those. Blood sugars are more stable, which means mood and hunger are more stable during this time. Inflammation is reduced as estrogen rises, which means you're recovering faster from exercise. There's actually more joint laxity, or joint laxity increases as estrogen rises, getting closer to ovulation. So mobility will probably feel better. There's actually a study in one of my coaches programs that I mentioned where there's actually a 10% higher likelihood of ACL tears in women's soccer players right around ovulation due to this increased joint laxity and basically the angle of their knees and hips. So not to stay away from sports, but just to kind of create that awareness around changes in the body. Serotonin and dopamine rise, so you'll probably feel happier and more motivated. Immune system is higher. So just overall, we feel much better during the follicular phase. Our body is recovering faster. So pushing heavier weights, like doing things that are more intense, are more supported during this phase. During the luteal phase, the body's priorities actually end up turning inward. So external stressors are not as supported. Blood sugars are less stable, so this creates more of an insulin resistant type environment. So having higher carbs is not as supported. Serotonin and dopamine drop, so you feel less motivated and probably more lethargic and tired. Unstable blood sugars and the drop off of serotonin and dopamine can cause mood and hunger changes. So we see less stability in mood and hunger. So there's a higher likelihood for hunger to kick in and food cravings. Inflammation is higher due to progesterone drop off mid-luteal phase. So that triggers that inflammatory response. Recovery is slower, so you might feel a little bit stiffer, or like you need a longer warm up. Immune system downregulates. So they say that the theory behind the immune system downregulating is said to be because the body doesn't want to attack a potentially newly fertilized egg. All right, understanding perimenopause and, well, so before I get onto this, any questions on that last section? No? All
Not
right.
really a question, but would that be the reason why sometimes it feels like you're very, very sore after a workout and other times you're like, maybe I didn't work as hard. I felt like I worked even harder and I don't feel as sore today.
Yep, so one thing to look at would be like, where are you in your cycle? So during the luteal phase, that's probably where you will feel sore. And during the follicular phase, like you'll probably be like, all right, let's crush it again.
Right. Okay, cool. Good to know.
Mhm. All right, so understanding menopause transition and how it affects the cycle. So that perimenopause transition to menopause. So perimenopause can begin anywhere from 2 to 12 years before menopause actually, like that life phase of menopause actually occurs. So the ovaries will gradually produce less and less estrogen during this time. It usually starts in women in their 40s, but can start in their 30s as well. Perimenopause lasts until menopause. Menopause is the point when the ovaries stop releasing eggs and ovulation no longer occurs. So we can break perimenopause, menopause transition into 4 phases. So phase 1 is very early perimenopause when cycles are still regular, but the ovaries will gradually produce less and less estrogen. Phase 2 is kind of early menopause transition, so still perimenopause when cycles start to become irregular. Phase 3 is late perimenopause, menopause transition, or where the first cycle is more than 60 days. Late menopause or phase 4 is 12 months from the final period. So basically the life phase of menopause is considered 1 year after the last period. So during perimenopause transition, a woman may first experience symptoms of decreasing estrogen while still having normal cycles. Then as she transitions into phase 2, cycles will become irregular and the effects of lower levels of progesterone will be felt. Remember, ovulation is the primary source of progesterone. So if ovulation starts to become intermittent, then we'll start to see kind of intermittent progesterone or lowering progesterone things felt. Losing progesterone changes the brain and nervous system's ability to handle stress. So this can increase migraine frequencies, anxiety, depression, memory loss, and sleep disruptions. Chronic stress can stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight response, leading to more hot flashes, heavier periods, mood, and sleep issues. It can also worsen insulin resistance and menopausal weight gain. As a woman progresses through perimenopause into menopause, lower estrogen and progesterone can cause metabolic changes and weight gain in the midsection. When estrogen falls, she loses the anabolic or muscle building properties of estradiol, which means the potential loss of muscle mass and decrease in metabolism or BMR. She's also losing the anti-inflammatory metabolism stimulating properties of estrogen and progesterone, which can lead to more insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is when someone has chronically elevated insulin levels. Insulin is the hormone that stimulates the cells to take up glucose, energy from carbs, into the cells. So basically consider insulin, basically the key that, or if you had a bunch of like, if you consider cells like garages, basically insulin is what opens up the garage to allow the glucose to go into the cell. So if like we're in that insulin resistant type environment, basically all those cars are just like stuck on the freeway and don't have any kind of exits or garages that they can be taken up into. Common causes of inflammation that can be worsened during perimenopause are things like alcohol consumption, higher consumption of processed high sugar foods, lack of sleep, under recovering digestive and gut health issues, as well as emotional stress. So since I talked about stress, let's actually talk about what stress is, because a lot of times people are like, oh, cortisol is bad, but cortisol, it's good in proper amounts. It's just that we live in a society where we're bombarded on a daily basis with things that elicit more and more stress responses. So cortisol is our stress hormone and is good in appropriate amounts. But in today's society, most of us are bombarded daily with stressors that cause an increased release of cortisol. So facts about cortisol. Cortisol levels naturally fluctuate throughout the day, being the highest around 8 a.m. and the lowest around 8 p.m. to midnight. This is your natural trigger for waking hours versus sleeping hours. This is one of the main controls of your circadian rhythm. So ideally, a healthy cortisol curve would look like cortisol high in the morning, kind of that cortisol awakening response, and then it would taper throughout the day and be low at the end of the day. Melatonin would start low in the morning, and then it would start to climb at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, your melatonin is high and your cortisol is low. At the beginning of the day, you have a cortisol awakening response, so that's high, and your melatonin is low. Now, what generally happens, because most people have a irregular or dysregulated circadian rhythm, we see cortisol kind of low and melatonin still high. So the first thing someone does in the morning is they have a cup of coffee to spike their cortisol response. Then it kind of tapers off, and then they have another cup of coffee. And by the end of the day, they want to go to sleep, but they're experiencing kind of this tired, wired kind of feeling. So that is where we might have to do some sort of reset of the circadian rhythm to get someone to get proper sleep, because that is where hormonal connection is restored. Sleeping is actually where most of our fat burning actually occurs. All right, back to cortisol. Cortisol stimulates the breakdown of fat and protein for the conversion into glucose or energy. It serves as the body's primary anti-inflammatory substance by reducing the inflammatory response of the immune system. It counters the actions of insulin, and its production elevates blood pressure. It has a suppressing effect on the immune system by subduing the formation of immune cells called T cells. Extended periods of cortisol secretion can result in muscle wasting, elevated blood sugar levels or hyperglycemia, suppression of healthy immune system function, and increased belly fat or visceral fat. Different ways that we experience stress. So forms of stress, perceived stress. So that could be emails, traffic, or calls. Internal or inflammatory stress. So that could be injury, gut health, or systemic inflammation. So one of the protocols that I use is called a flush protocol. And within that, I'm working to reduce systemic inflammation, because that can be the root cause of a lot of other issues, whether it be gut health or like hormonal balance, insulin sensitivity. Glycemic stress. So not eating enough can cause glycemic stress, eating too much, obesity, insulin dysregulation, and insulin resistance can all be glycemic stressors. Circadian, so not getting enough sleep or not getting enough quality sleep. So circadian dysregulation, so kind of that cortisol melatonin curve being off. So what happens when stress increases over time? So consider your metabolism as a stress barometer, and its goal is to utilize its energy efficiently. It's like a miser of energy. If it doesn't feel safe or like resources are plentiful in its environment, it's going to conserve energy by any means possible. It creates changes to cope with the outside environment. So these changes could look like a lower thyroid, reproductive hormone imbalance, adrenal insufficiency or dysfunction, changes in brain chemistry, and even changes in digestion. So things that I like to think about as far as like how stress affects our body. So if you had to run from a bear, we're just going to consider that the stress response. Your body would divert blood from digesting processes, because it would divert blood to the limbs to run. So if you are living in a chronically stressed state, then that's going to reduce the amount of blood that goes to the digestive process. So you can see digestive issues if you are chronically stressed. If you are running from the bear, the body will basically elicit a cortisol response to dump glucose into the bloodstream to utilize for energy or activity to run from that bear. If the stress that you're getting is your boss telling you that you have a deadline and you need to accomplish it by such and such a time, so you're not moving, now you just have glucose basically being dumped into your bloodstream and you're not utilizing it. So that can be where we see basically issues associated with A1C. So potential pre-diabetic, we see fasting blood glucose issues. And then if that goes on for too long, we see insulin issues. So the body is doing what it has been brought up to do, evolutionary terms, like biologically speaking, it's doing what it's supposed to. However, that doesn't always equate to us being healthy in the current state of the world, I guess you could say. So as far as like things that I look for, so I look at biofeedback markers. So is there stress in your environment? So sleep. Poor sleep could be a sign your body is dealing with stress, waking up throughout the night. Hunger. Lack of hunger or binging. Those are both signs of stress. Recovery. If someone is having poor recovery from their workouts, then that could be a sign of stress. It could be a stressor like not eating enough or not getting the right kind of macros. Injuries. Energy, decreased energy. So the body will work to slow you down if it doesn't feel like it has the right kind of energy coming in. Extreme energy highs and lows. Digestion, so slow digestion, food sensitivities, and constipation. All right, so what do we do? So I generally use a RF3 protocol when I'm working to like kind of reset someone's metabolic needs. So it's kind of like a great metabolic reset. So consume foods and practice activities that help to manage inflammation. Balance blood sugars. So eating glycemically balanced meals every 2 to 4 hours. So a glycemically balanced meal would be something with protein, carbs, fats, and fibers in it. Avoid foods that can worsen the effects of insulin resistance and inflammation. Increase nutrient-dense foods that support hormone production. So I have my clients use things like seed cycling. So this is a way through the use of seeds during the follicular phase versus the luteal phase to support estrogen during the follicular phase with pumpkin seed and flaxseed, and progesterone during the luteal phase with sesame and sunflower seed. Don't cut carbs. Cycle them appropriately with what you need within your cycle. Support your body with appropriate activities. So same thing, like cycle specifically with your cycle. And taking a cyclical approach to high intensity and low intensity training is going to be beneficial. Self-care, and then learning to listen to your body. All right, so understanding your hormones allows you to fully take advantage of your naturally given superpowers. Knowing your hormones lets you know when the best time to push is and when it's better to pull back and turn your focuses inward or to other tasks. This knowledge allows you to no longer feel like you're fighting against a current. By learning to connect with your cycle, you can not only learn how to cycle your training, nutrition, and hormone support to appropriately align with your body for better results, but also to achieve better productivity in life. This knowledge can help you best align your body during the different times in your cycle and the phases in your life. Any questions?
Yeah. So how do we know? So that, thank you so very much. This has been amazing information. So we hire you by getting in touch with you to figure out what our personal baselines would be. Like, I want to do all that. I want to learn how to, instead of always feeling like I'm fighting with what I'm feeling, how about I use what I'm feeling to my ability in an effort to get whole body feeling better.
Yep.
So we would figure out like what our macros should be for the day and what our phases are and that kind of thing. We
Yep.
would get in touch with you. That's what this page is. And you
Yep.
would, do you tell it, like, where are the prices or
So,
budgeting?
like we can talk about prices and programs. For
Okay.
any new clients, I do have a little special for you. So, yeah, we'll talk more about those.
Cool. But then that tailors it to like what I would need to know and understand about my well-being,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Okay,
because
cool.
basically we would have like weekly or every other week one-on-one calls. to
Okay.
talk specifically about what you're dealing with.
Okay. And even if I'm not really dealing with one thing over another, I just want to, as a whole health, that's something we can do. Because I guess maybe I could feel better if I understood what I should be doing to feel better.
Mhm.
You know, we all could, I think, but okay, cool. This is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else with any questions?
You know what makes me feel better? When Tina comes to class.
I think Tina feels better when you come to class.
Yes.
Problem solved.
Problem solved.
We motivate each other.
That's
Yeah.
right. I love it. I get all
Yeah.
excited when I know Tina's going to be at class. Not that I don't love it when I'm just one-on-one with Jen, but Jen made me freaking do crab crawl and some other stuff. And I was like, where is Tina when I need her?
Where's Tina to give me a break?
No, this was phenomenal. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, anybody else, any other questions? I did record this, so if you want to rewatch it, just let me know. If I have your email address, I can send it to you. Just shoot me a message. I'll make sure it gets to you.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Are we allowed to let others watch this?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, send it to your friends. Oh, perfect. All right. Well, I will stop the screen share. And I will stop the recording, and I appreciate you guys all for being here.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed it.
We did.
Very
Thank you
much.
so much.